Okay, good morning. It's Dave at the Behavior Ninja channel on YouTube, home of the Behavior Ninja app, and here to support teachers and other people that work with and experience in their kind of day-to-day work, challenging behavior from young people. What I'm going to talk to you about today is low-level disruption. There's a number of reasons for this. Probably of all the issues that teachers chat with me about, low-level disruption is one of the main issues that they bring up. And I was reminded of this recently by a friend of mine, Pauline Holbrook, who works at the SSAT. So thanks, Pauline, for the heads up on that. And absolutely right, it's a useful thing to make a video about and to talk about. So yeah, it is an issue that challenges teachers a huge amount, and is a commonly occurring problem. Um, but I think also there are other reasons to look at low-level disruption. I think it's about how potentially it can make a teacher feel. So, of course, when you've got one student who's disrupting in your classroom, perhaps they've got special needs or complex needs, and we'll certainly be covering that as part of the chat today. But if you have one or maybe a small number of students who display that kind of behaviour and have their own issues, then we can frequently as teachers look at that in quite a positive way and say, well, it's specifically about that person's difficulties. I know how to help them and support them with those things. So this is what I'm going to do in response. And of course, that's a great way to deal with those problems. But when you have a low-level disruption happening across the board, perhaps, or in a bigger cohort of a group, then that's when teachers can frequently start to think, is this actually about me? Am I cut out to do this kind of work? Am I ever going to get it right? It can be frustrating, it can be dismaying, it can start to really tap into some of our concerns and reduce our confidence, of course. And then we get into a position where we're quite anxious about it. And of course, as we all know, when we make decisions when we're anxious or in any heightened emotional state, they're not always the best decisions we can make. So we really start to question whether or not we can do it, whether or not we are in the right profession. And it's important for me to say now, yes, you can do it. Everyone can do it. Everyone can manage challenging behavior. It's just about applying techniques. And of course, if you don't know those techniques, let's learn them. Okay, and this is the place to do that. Um, I think the other issue with teachers about low-level disruption is about where it has the potential to go. And so, low-level disruption, it happens by increments, and of course it can carry on. And 38 degrees is the angle at which an avalanche becomes possible on a hillside, on a mountainside. And behavior can be like that too. There's always this kind of danger that low-level disruption spills into something else. So we're always anxious about that, I guess. And so low-level disruption is a huge issue in that sense, in terms of perspective sometimes. Um, so, why might low-level disruption happen? Well, sometimes it happens because there is, from the children's or young people's point of view, there is a perceived power vacuum in the room. That's not always what happens, but sometimes it happens for that reason. Other times they might already have an established set of norms, and those norms might be different to yours. And that's quite important because, you know, frequently teachers will say, these are the norms of my classroom. Perhaps a good exercise for you would be to write down what your norms are in your class, but then compare them to what actually happens. Because the real norms in your classroom are the things that happen. And you might have one belief about the norms, and then the children might display a completely different set of beliefs through their behavior. And really what we want to do is to bring the children's norms in line with our own, and that's absolutely appropriate for us to do. We are in a position of authority as teachers, and we need to recognize that and manage that professionally. And yes, of course, it's tough, but as I've said to you, we'll apply knowledge, and then that makes it easy. So yeah, if their expectations of how things are going to go in the class differ from yours, then we need to do something about that. And that's often how low-level disruption looks, and how children's different expectations will manifest themselves as low-level disruption. So we do need to look at it from that perspective. So what do we do about low-level disruption? That's what we want to know. That's what we're watching the video for. And I suppose the really simple answer with low-level disruption is don't let it happen in the first place. Of course, that sounds kind of really smug, and it's not really why we're watching the vid, but it's important for us to understand that not letting it happen in the first place is a useful way to go. So and that's notwithstanding the fact that people will say, Dave, what do I do when? And I get that. So what we're going to do today then, we're going to talk about proactive and reactive strategies. And we'll also talk about special needs and complex needs and so on, and how we can manage it within that, you know, those kind of parameters too, because I think that's quite important. So I will give you some ideas of what you can do proactively to reduce the likelihood, and I'll also talk to you about some skills and techniques you can use because you're getting low-level disruption in your setting right now, and you know there's something that you want to do about it. It is worth saying, firstly, then, that low-level disruption requires low-level intervention. Okay, we're not going to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. If you require higher levels of intervention, then it's not low-level disruption you're talking about, it's flat-out disruption, and that's something different, and we'll have to use different techniques for that. And you know, we might be talking about, perhaps if control is lost completely, we might be talking about something like a re-establishment of expectations, and the re-establishment technique is a very powerful technique to use when things have absolutely broken down. And I'll be doing a video on how to run a re-establishment session at a later date. But let's just say at this point we're dealing with low-level disruption, so we're not needing to use any of the kind of the more impactful stuff that we would have in our repertoire anyway, in our toolkit. So first of all then, proactively, we really want to start looking at routines. Now, routines are something that I guess are really well done in early years, and you know, those early stages of primary, they're absolutely fantastic. And if you do get an opportunity to watch a good primary practitioner, proper behavior ninja in action with their group, you will see that routines are well embedded, and that's a really important element of how we use routines, in the sense that you know, you don't just tell them this is a routine, this is what I want from the class. You don't just put them on the wall as a set of rules, for example. That's not going to get you anywhere. That's just going to be display, and people will choose or not to read it and to follow it. The way to make routines matter and work for you and work for kids is to practice them, to drill them, to make them become habit. So if I've got a routine, for example, about let's say entering the classroom, it's no good saying to the students or the children, there's a list of what I expect when you enter the classroom, by the way, so that's what I'll get tomorrow, right? It's not going to happen. We need to then perform that routine. We need to perform it regularly and frequently early on, and redo it when it's wrong until it's right, and then reinforce it every day from that point onwards. So having routines embedded with kids, and as I say, primary staff are absolutely brilliant at this, but having those things embedded is a really powerful, really useful way to go, because actually what you're doing there is you're helping children to develop habits that reinforce a simple fact in your classroom. Make it harder to misbehave and easier to behave well, easier to make good behavior choices, more difficult to make bad ones. And that is key. It's fundamental to why we use routines in the first place, because we want, we all know that habits are hard to break, so we want to create a situation where the habits that they have formed are good ones, because you know, good habits are just as hard to break, I suppose, as bad ones, is kind of the way I'm thinking about it. Okay, so what kind of things might you have routines for, and how do they help with low-level disruption? Well, you might have routines for entering and leaving the room. You might have routines for moving from one kind of learning to another. So for primaries, that might be moving from, let's say, the story corner to the tables, or it might be moving from group discussion to sharing with the wider class. So those are the kind of situations where we might have routines. You might embed a routine about volume expectations. Maybe the noise in your room isn't where you want it to be, or better, you are establishing your norms from the start. And remember, with routines, the best time to establish and embed your routines is start of the year. The second best time is tomorrow. Okay, so if you haven't done it yet, don't worry about it, don't panic, but let's embed it from tomorrow. Let's begin that process. And it doesn't matter whether you're in primary or secondary, this can be done. Okay, so yeah, what am I going to do then to embed it? Well, I'm going to do dummy runs. I'm going to do learning activities. So let's say I've got a routine for the volume level in my classroom, and I do use a volume routine in my class, and it consists of 3 levels. There is silence, and that silence might be imposed because of an inability to manage my expectations. The children's inability to manage my expectations around volume has been an issue, so I've dropped into silence as a consequence. It might be silence just because that's what I need at that point. Then I'll have paired partner level volume, and then I'll have group level volume, you know, when we're talking as a group. So I've got those 3 levels of volume in my class, and that's my routine. But then I'm going to say to the students, okay, so we're going to do an activity here, and the level of noise I want is partner speak. That's what I'm looking for, nothing more. Okay, I've explained to them exactly how that sounds, and typically that would be something like, if you are using partner speak correctly, because I've got to define, I've got to be, you know, what I think is partner level volume and what 2 young people think is might be different things. So I'm establishing my expectations. I'm going to say, when you are talking with your partner, 2 people at the same table talking together will not be disrupted by the volume of your speech. So that's how you know that you've got partner speak, partner volume, partner talk right in this setting. Right, here's your activity. I want you to talk to your partner, your learning buddy, or whatever I'm calling it. I want you to talk to that person, and we're using the right volume. Okay, where you go. And then I'm correcting, I'm adjusting, I'm praising those who've got it spot on, because I'm much happier to do the positives, focus on the positives rather than the negatives, which we'll chat about a little bit more. But what I'm doing is the learning is almost secondary in that situation in terms of, you know, the academic knowledge that's being learned at that point. What I'm really interested in is the learning of the technique, the learning of the routine. So, you know, that's something that, you know, we have to get right with routine. So if you decide, right, I'm going to develop a management routine, sit down, pen and paper, write down your routine, you know, for, let's say, entering the classroom. So, you know, you want to line up in the corridor and so on and so forth. Write it down exactly as you want it to be, and then train the students to that technique. Don't just expect it to work. With some kids, of course, it will, the vast majority perhaps, but you've got to get it to work for everybody. That's key. And, you know, as I said, we'll talk about SAMH, ADHD, autism, you know, all the kind of complex needs that might come into that at a later point. Okay, so I've established my routines, I've taught them, I've begun the process of embedding. How do I really reinforce that? Well, when I see kids get it right, I'm going to notice. I am not going to pounce on all the kids getting it wrong. I want a positive bias in the way I embed my routine. So I'm going to be saying, John, you've absolutely cracked that routine. That's brilliant. It might be the 2 or 3 kids around John haven't cracked it, but I'm focusing on the one that got it right. I'm going to focus on the behavior because I know I will get more of the type of behavior that I focus on. Okay, so let's focus on the good stuff. The other kids will come online, vast majority, and at that point I'll be able to praise them as well. So that's my routine. It's a very kind of embedding the routine using positive language is definitely key. With primary kids, I might introduce little mantras and chants and songs even that help to embed the routines that I've put in place. And I've seen some brilliant practice from primary behaviour ninjas who've done that. With primary and secondary, I like to use countdown techniques. So if, let's say, the students are discussing something as a group at a table using that level of volume, and I'm saying, right, in 3 minutes, I'll need your attention focused this way. And in 1 minute, I need your attention focused this way. And finally, I'm going to be doing a countdown from 5 to 0. And I'm going to be praising as I go. So I need silent attention in 5 seconds. 4, okay, you guys have already got it. That's brilliant. Cracked it. Thanks, guys. 3, 2, come on, guys, you're getting there. 1, 0, thank you. Brilliant. Silent attention, eyes on me, pens down, let's go. And so I'm embedding that routine. I've used the countdown. I'm relating it to the techniques and the routines that I've got in place. So yeah, that's a way to establish the routines so that you don't get low level disruption in the first place. But what about when you've got it right now? Well, okay, so you might already think, well, I'll start embedding the routines, that will help over time, but you want something in the interim. So I might use, for example, proximity to, so let's, to a student who is being disrupted. Let's say I've got a group of disruptive students around a couple of tables. It might be that I decide that as I deliver the session, I'm going to stand fairly close to them. Now, if you're watching this during COVID restrictions, you might say, well, I can't get too close, and I understand that. I'm just saying this is a technique forever, for the future, and so on. So it might be that if I've got 2 disruptive tables over here, then I walk towards them and I'm talking to the whole class, of course, but I'm close to those students. I'm not doing it as a punishment. I'm doing it to help them to make a better behavior choice, and that's key. So by standing close to them as I'm talking, there's that little bit of extra impetus on them to get it right. I might decide teaching from the back of the classroom, so everybody is facing the board at the front, including me, but I'm at the back of the class. I can see everybody, nobody can see me. That can have quite a kind of subtle influence on kids to remain focused when they're not sure where you are in the room. Again, I'm not doing it to catch them out, I'm doing it to support them to make the best choice that they can. So, something like that technique can be quite useful. It might be that I start to use a little bit of praise around the room, so I might say something like, the guys on this table have got straight on with that group of questions. That's brilliant. That's nice to see. I might say something like, perhaps I'm using some sort of class reward system. In primary, that could be something like the dojo system. So I might say something like, you know what, Julie, if you're the student who is looking for dojo points, I'm the person who's going to be dishing them out because your behavior is perfect. It might be that I'm saying to a secondary group, maybe we're using Secret Student, and if you're not aware of Secret Student as a technique, I'll probably do a video on that at some point, but I can share that information if you email me, of course, or contact me. It might be that I might say something similar, John, if you're a Secret Student today, you're doing really well to earn a group reward. Or I might want to phrase it in the form of a question, something like, I wonder if Secret Student is following my expectations around rules and routines in the class at the moment, and then just carry on with the lesson. It doesn't have to be, that again, it's not sledgehammer to crack a nut. This is low level intervention for low level disruption. Now, John's doing really well, so I'm praising him, but the other people around him who perhaps aren't making as good a behavior choice will have to think, I wonder if I'm Secret Student, and then they have to adjust their behavior slightly. So it's a subtle way of doing that, and putting perhaps a little bit of, I suppose, peer pressure on them as well, but peer pressure in a very positive way. Okay, so right, what about if you've got SEND and complex needs in your class, and you might think, and frequently I hear from teachers who will say, well, it's easy to say that, Dave, but I've got 30 kids in my class and 3 of them have got ADHD, and other 2 are on the autistic spectrum, and I've got kids with attachment problems, and I've got kids who are having an epic at home and all that kind of, and I get all that stuff. What I would say is make your classroom friendly for all of those people, okay? And then see that when you, let's say, take ADHD for an example, when you make a classroom ADHD friendly, you will be amazed at how many other students will benefit from that ADHD friendly classroom. A typical example is, an uncluttered presentation area, so the students are focused on what's on the board rather than the brightly coloured posters around it. That will help lots of students who are diagnosed with attention deficit, but also students who, don't have a diagnosis, but their attention wanders sometimes. So, the truth is that if you make your class friendly as a learning environment for everybody, it'll frequently help a lot more people than just those who have a diagnosis. So, that's one example of a technique that I would use with ADHD children. In terms of special needs and complex needs, I mentioned the app earlier on. I have the app on my tablet here, and you can see I've currently got it open at ADHD. And you can scroll through a lot of sort of ideas of what we can do to support ADHD learners. So there's lots on the app for you to look at. Okay, so I hope that's been useful to you. These are techniques that I have used with SMH students for decades, and I know I sometimes get told, and I do get told, no, you definitely wouldn't be able to do that with the sort of children I work with. Believe that you can. Okay, there's a really interesting little phrase quote that I like, which says, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And that's useful to think about. Don't say that can't work with my students. Think, how can I make that work with my students? Be much more positive about it. And that's the way that behavior ninjas think. That's the perspective that behavior ninjas have. And as I've said to you, everybody can be a behavior ninja. It's the application of knowledge. And if you haven't got the knowledge, it's the gain of knowledge, and you're in the right place. I'll finish there. I do hope that's useful. Comments below as always. Please like and subscribe. Remember, you've got the app there. And if there's any issues and you're really struggling, get in touch with me. I will always help. Okay. Thanks a lot for your time. Take care.